Just more junk from some old-timer, the TSA agent sneered, dumping the contents of the worn leather pouch into a plastic bin. A tarnished silver cross clattered against a bent wing. He didn't know he'd just desecrated a legend. The chaos of Northgate International Airport's Terminal B was a symphony of modern anxieties. The rolling of suitcases on tile, the incessant chime of phones, the strained announcements over the PA system, it all blended into a single, gray hum. In the middle of it all, moving with a quiet deliberateness that defied the surrounding hurry, was Sam Miller. At 79, he was a study in contrasts. His frame was wiry, almost frail, but his posture was ramrod straight, a relic of a discipline the world had long forgotten. He walked with a slight, almost imperceptible limp, the kind that no surgery could ever truly fix, a permanent reminder of a fall from a great height long ago. His eyes, pale blue and webbed with wrinkles, weren't scanning for his gait, they were assessing the space, mapping exits, noting faces, a habit ingrained so deep it was now just part of his DNA. He wore simple khaki pants and a faded navy blue windbreaker, the kind you'd find in any department store. There was nothing about him that would draw a second glance. He was just another old man, making his way through the world. In his hand, he clutched a worn, weather-beaten leather pouch, its surface softened by decades of touch. He was heading to Colorado Springs, to the Air Force Academy, for a reunion he had put off for years. They'd told him it was the last one. "We're running out of runway," Sam, his old commander, had written. The TSA security line snaked forward with agonizing slowness. When it was finally his turn, Sam placed his windbreaker and shoes in a gray bin. Then, he hesitated, holding the leather pouch. The TSA agent, a young man named Trent with a name badge pinned crookedly to his chest and a smirk that seemed to be his default expression, snapped his gum. "Something to declare, Grandpa?" Beside him stood a new trainee, a young woman with wide, nervous eyes. Trent, clearly eager to perform his authority for her, puffed out his chest. "It's personal," Sam said, his voice raspy with disuse. "They're just mementos." "Yeah, well, rules are rules," Trent said, snatching the pouch from Sam's hand. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dirty rag. "Let's see what treasures are in this old purse." Trent didn't open it. He simply turned it upside down over an empty plastic bin. The contents spilled out with a clatter that was both shockingly loud and intimately small. It wasn't a collection of official medals in a neat case. It was the soul of a life, scattered on cheap plastic. A tarnished, ornate silver cross, its ribbon frayed, lay beside a single, faded black and white photograph. Next to them, a piece of twisted, olive-drab metal, the bent wing of a helicopter, scarred by fire and impact. The Air Force Cross. The second highest award for valor a man in his service could receive. Sam's breath caught in his throat. The photo, now lying face up, showed 4 young men in flight suits, arms slung around each other, grinning in the harsh sun of a foreign land. Sam was the only one in that photo still alive. "See? Just junk," Trent said to the trainee, nudging her with his elbow. "Told you. Probably bought it at a flea market." He gestured dismissively at the bin. "You're clear. Move along." Sam didn't move. For a long moment, the world seemed to shrink to the contents of that gray bin. He leaned forward, his back protesting, and his hand, scarred and trembling slightly, reached in to retrieve his life. He picked up the bent wing first, its sharp edge a familiar pain against his palm. Then the cross. Finally, with the utmost care, he picked up the photograph, his thumb gently brushing away a smudge of dust from a fallen brother's face. A few people in line shuffled their feet, looking away. In the priority lane, a young airline pilot named David Roth watched, his friendly pre-flight demeanor vanishing, replaced by a mask of cold fury. He saw the insignia on the cross's ribbon. He knew what it was. And he saw the look on the old man's face, not anger, but a profound, hollowed-out sorrow that was far worse. He saw a hero being erased, and he decided, in that instant, that he wouldn't let it happen. Sam found an empty seat near gate B12, away from the main flow of traffic. The terminal's noise washed over him, but he didn't hear it. He sat with the leather pouch on his lap, his hands resting on top of it, as if to protect it from any further violation. He didn't try to put the items back inside. The sanctity of the container had been broken. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he wasn't in an airport. He was back in the screaming chaos of a jungle clearing in Vietnam, the air thick with the smell of jet fuel and fear. He could feel the weight of the wounded pilot he was carrying, could hear the thumping blades of the HH-3E Jolly Green Giant overhead just before the enemy fire tore it from the sky. The bent wing in his pocket wasn't a souvenir, it was a promise. A promise he'd made to the dying pilot of that downed bird, that he would never be forgotten. The faces in the photograph were his crew, his boys, lost in that same fiery crash. That others may live. The motto of the pararescue was more than a slogan, it was a debt paid in blood and sacrifice. A debt that a young man with a crooked name badge had just treated like trash. Meanwhile, David Roth, the pilot, stood near a pillar, his back to the crowd. He wasn't on his personal phone. He was speaking into his official airline communicator, connected to the airport's operations center. "This is Captain Roth, Flight 1138 to Colorado Springs," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm at the Terminal B security checkpoint. I just witnessed a TSA agent publicly mishandle and desecrate what I identified as an Air Force cross belonging to an elderly passenger." He paused, listening. "Yes, I am absolutely certain. It was an Air Force cross. The passenger is an elderly gentleman, appears to be a veteran. Yes, I understand. I'm reporting it because it's a matter of honor. The man's name is Samuel Miller. He's on my flight manifest." He gave them Sam's gate number. "Someone needs to make this right. This is not how we treat our heroes." His call was routed immediately to the small, often overlooked airport military liaison office. Back at the security checkpoint, Trent was leaning against a counter, laughing with the trainee about a ridiculous complaint a passenger had made earlier. His supervisor's voice crackled over his radio. "All B checkpoint staff, be advised. We have a potential VIP arrival. High-level USAF personnel, ETA 10 minutes. Look sharp." Trent rolled his eyes. "Probably some desk jockey colonel who thinks he owns the airport," he muttered to the trainee, who giggled nervously. "Don't worry, we'll give him the full treatment." He had no idea the storm that was gathering, a storm that had been summoned by a single pilot's outrage, a storm that was coming directly for him. The first sign that this was not a routine visit came not in the form of a person, but of a presence. Two men, tall and imposing in the immaculate dress blue uniforms of the United States Air Force Honor Guard, walked into Terminal B. They moved in perfect, synchronized steps, their polished shoes making no sound on the polished floor. They didn't speak or look at anyone. They simply proceeded to the area just past the security checkpoint and stood at parade rest, flanking the entrance to the concourse. The terminal's hum began to falter. Conversations trailed off. Travelers paused mid-stride, their phones forgotten. The air grew still, charged with a sudden, inexplicable tension. Trent's laughter died in his throat as he stared at the two silent sentinels. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. Then, he saw him. A man strode through the terminal doors as if he owned the air within them. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a service dress uniform that glittered with the weight of authority. On each shoulder, 4 silver stars were stark against the dark blue fabric. General Wallace, the commander of Air Combat Command, had arrived. He wasn't looking at the airport officials who were now scrambling towards him, their faces a mixture of panic and confusion. He wasn't looking at the honor guard. His eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the crowded gate area with singular purpose. They swept past the signs, the shops, the hundreds of faces, until they found what they were looking for. They locked onto a frail, 79-year-old man sitting alone by the window at gate B12. The general changed course, walking directly toward Sam. The crowd, sensing the gravity of the moment, parted before him like the Red Sea. He moved with a quiet power that commanded more respect than any shouted order ever could. He stopped directly in front of Sam's chair. Sam, pulled from his reverie by the sudden silence, looked up into the eyes of the four-star general. For a moment, he looked confused, as if he thought the man was there for someone else. General Wallace raised his hand to his brow in a salute so crisp, so perfect, it seemed to cut the air. It was a salute of profound, unconditional respect. Mr. Miller, the general's voice was a low baritone that carried across the silent terminal. It is an honor, sir. He didn't call him by a rank. He called him a legend, by his actions. Slowly, using the armrest for support, Sam rose to his feet. He tried to stand straighter, to summon the posture of the young man who had earned the honors now lying broken in his lap. General, Sam murmured, his voice barely a whisper. I was a young lieutenant in flight school when I first heard the stories about you, Sam, General Wallace said, lowering his salute. The Angel of Danang. The man who pulled my own flight instructor out of a burning Skyraider under heavy fire. We all wanted to be you. An aide stepped forward, holding a magnificent, glass-enclosed cherry-wood display case. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a brass plaque. It was already engraved. The general turned his gaze to the worn leather pouch on Sam's seat. His expression hardened for a fraction of a second before softening again as he looked at Sam. His next words were addressed to Sam, but they were meant for everyone. Sir, he said, his voice full of a deep, resonant respect. We have failed you today. But honor, once earned, can never be taken away. It can only be neglected. With your permission, we would like to correct that neglect. He didn't reach for the items. He asked. It was a transfer of power so complete, so absolute, that the air crackled with it. He was asking permission from a retired airman to restore the dignity that his own country's representatives had tried to strip away. Trent, watching from 50 feet away, felt the blood drain from his face. The universe had just tilted on its axis, and he was being crushed beneath it. Sam simply nodded, a single, slow dip of his head. He was too overwhelmed to speak. At the general's signal, the two honor guards stepped forward. With the precision of a sacred ritual, one of them, wearing immaculate white gloves, reached down. He didn't touch the pouch. He carefully picked up the Air Force Cross, holding it as if it were a living thing, and placed it gently on the black velvet of the display case. He then took the bent, scarred piece of helicopter wing and set it beside the metal. Finally, he picked up the faded photograph, his touch impossibly delicate, and positioned it reverently in the center. He closed the glass lid, the click of the latch echoing in the cavernous silence. The second guardsman then handed the case to General Wallace, who turned and presented it to Sam. The tarnished, disrespected junk was now framed, honored, and enshrined, its story clear for all to see. General Wallace then turned his attention to the security area. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His gaze was enough. It swept over the assembled TSA staff until it landed on Trent, who looked as if he might faint. Your duty, the general stated, his voice cold and clear, is to protect this country. The man you insulted today is this country. He is its courage, its sacrifice, its quiet, unbreakable honor. Some things have a weight that cannot be measured by your scanners or understood by your regulations. Their weight is measured in lives saved, in duties performed, in promises kept. You are not qualified to handle them. He turned away, dismissing them completely. The story didn't end there. On board Flight 1138, just after the plane reached cruising altitude, Captain David Roth's voice came over the PA system. It was calm, professional, but held an undercurrent of deep emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege. We are honored to have a true American hero flying with us today. The gentleman in seat 14C is Mr. Samuel Miller, a retired United States Air Force pararescue jumper and a recipient of the Air Force Cross for his extraordinary heroism in Vietnam. He is credited with saving the lives of over 50 downed airmen. The next time you look up at a clear blue sky, remember it is men like him who have kept it safe for the rest of us. A single person started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire cabin erupted in a wave of sustained, heartfelt applause. It wasn't pity. It was a spontaneous outpouring of gratitude and awe. Sam, holding the display case in his lap, simply bowed his head, a single tear tracing a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. When the flight landed in Colorado Springs, a new honor guard was waiting on the tarmac. As Sam deplaned, a line of young, bright-eyed Air Force Academy cadets stood at attention. They didn't speak. They simply saluted as he walked past. He stopped in front of the ranking cadet, a young woman with fire in her eyes. He didn't hand her the case. He simply looked at her, and then at all of them. "Fly high," he said, his voice finally steady. "Fly high, and see the things for us that we no longer can." Back at Northgate International, a small, permanent brass plaque was installed next to the Terminal B security checkpoint a week later. It reads, "Honor is not a souvenir. It is the soul of a nation. Let us never forget those who carry it for us." The events of that day at Northgate weren't truly about a disgraced agent, who was promptly fired, or a new plaque on a wall. They were about a moment of clarity in a world that moves too fast. The incident was a powerful reminder that a nation's character is not just defined by the battles it wins, but by how it remembers and respects the warriors it sends to fight them. It was never about a piece of metal in a plastic bin, it was about a society so loud with its own urgency that it risks becoming deaf to the quiet frequency of honor. The ultimate lesson, perhaps, is not just that our heroes deserve respect, but that respect itself is an action. It is the conscious choice to see beyond the surface, to look past the faded jacket, the slow gait, and the wrinkled hands, and recognize the giant who stands within. How many men and women like Samuel Miller do we walk past every day, their stories hidden in plain sight, their legacies waiting for a single person to simply see them? We all have unrecognized heroes in our lives, our parents, grandparents, or the quiet neighbor at the end of the street. What did this story make you think about? Please share your reflections in the comments below. We strive to create a community built on mutual respect, so let's honor these stories and each other in the discussion. If you believe that the legacies of people like Sam Miller deserve to be seen, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories that matter.